Tensions between the United States and Iran have recently intensified, and many observers believe the situation is moving toward a far more dangerous stage. Reports circulating in international media and strategic analyses suggest that the confrontation is gradually approaching a critical point. Within the last day, an unusual development reportedly occurred in the Strait of Hormuz, where commercial shipping activity appeared to come to a complete stop for a period of time. This is an extraordinary situation because the strait is widely recognized as one of the most vital routes for global energy transportation. A significant portion of the world's oil and natural gas passes through this narrow waterway, meaning that any interruption to shipping immediately raises concerns among major economies and global energy markets. For decades, the countries of the Persian Gulf have feared the possibility of exactly this type of disruption. Iran has repeatedly stated in the past that if it faced major military pressure, it could respond by exploiting the strategic geography of the region and interfering with maritime traffic in the strait. Some analysts now believe that the current developments may represent the early stages of such a scenario. Even a short interruption in ship movements is already producing noticeable effects. Oil tankers have started waiting in safer areas instead of entering the passage. Maritime insurers are increasing their premiums sharply due to rising risks, and several shipping companies are temporarily avoiding routes through the area until the situation becomes clearer. For Gulf economies, the implications of such disruptions are extremely serious. Nations like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates depend heavily on consistent exports of oil and gas to sustain their economies. If those exports are delayed or reduced, government revenues can fall quickly, placing pressure on national budgets and creating uncertainty for economic stability. Because of this, many analysts believe that leaders across the region are now confronting a difficult strategic dilemma. One possible path would involve offering stronger support to the United States and assisting in efforts designed to eliminate the threat that Iran may pose to regional shipping lanes. Certain voices within American political circles have even suggested that the long-term objective of military pressure could include significantly weakening the Iranian leadership or forcing political change within the country. If that approach becomes the dominant strategy, Gulf nations could increase their logistical cooperation, intelligence sharing, or other forms of support to help accelerate the outcome of the conflict. At the same time, another option is increasingly being discussed in diplomatic discussions. Rather than expanding their support for military escalation, some regional governments might attempt to encourage Washington to seek a quicker diplomatic resolution. Several Gulf states possess notable economic influence in their relationship with the United States. Many of them are major investors in American industries and financial markets, and they also hold considerable quantities of U.S. government debt. Their strategic partnerships with Washington extend beyond security cooperation into long-term economic ties. Because of this interconnected relationship, some experts argue that if the economic damage from the conflict continues to grow, American allies in the region may quietly urge U.S. leadership to prioritize negotiations over a prolonged military campaign. For these countries, an extended conflict would bring heavy financial costs and potentially destabilize the region for years. So far, there is little evidence that Gulf states are preparing to directly join the fighting against Iran. Despite rising tensions, most governments appear determined to avoid becoming active participants in the conflict. Their caution is understandable because direct involvement could make their territories vulnerable to retaliation. Military bases, oil facilities, and major cities could all become potential targets. For that reason, many analysts expect diplomatic pressure behind the scenes to gradually increase. Regional partners may begin encouraging Washington to shorten the duration of military operations or explore a negotiated settlement before the economic impact grows even larger. The challenge is that the crisis has already reached a point where every available option carries significant consequences. Military activity continues to intensify, yet economic pressure on regional economies grows stronger with each passing day. If the confrontation drags on, the instability surrounding the Persian Gulf may spread beyond regional security concerns and begin affecting the broader global economy. Governments, financial institutions, and energy companies around the world are therefore monitoring developments in the Strait of Hormuz extremely closely. The future of the conflict could depend heavily on what happens in this narrow maritime corridor. If stability is not restored quickly, the repercussions may extend much further than many policymakers currently anticipate. The effects of the disruption are already being felt outside the Middle East. Global financial markets have started reacting nervously to each new report from the region, while major energy firms are reassessing their projections for supply and pricing in the months ahead. Even a brief pause in tanker movements can create uncertainty, because such a large share of the world's oil trade travels through this single passage. If the disruption were to last several weeks, analysts warn that energy markets could face a serious supply shortage. In that scenario, oil prices would likely climb rapidly, placing economic pressure on countries that rely heavily on imported fuel. Within the Gulf states themselves, the stakes are even higher. Oil exports are not simply an important industry. They represent the backbone of their entire economic structure. Government spending, social welfare programs, national development projects, and the massive sovereign investment funds managed by these countries all depend heavily on steady energy revenue. If tankers cannot safely depart from regional ports, or if insurers refuse to provide coverage for voyages through the strait, the economic consequences could begin to appear almost immediately. That is why policymakers across the region are carefully analyzing every possible outcome of the conflict. At the same time, a quiet diplomatic balancing act may be taking place among allies. Gulf states continue to rely on American security guarantees and military partnerships to protect their interests. However, their economic priorities require safe and uninterrupted maritime trade routes. If military actions against Iran end up causing prolonged instability in those routes, tensions could begin to emerge within the alliance itself. Some observers believe that Gulf governments might eventually rely more heavily on their financial influence to shape the direction of the crisis. Their sovereign wealth funds control hundreds of billions of dollars and play a major role in international investment markets, and several of these countries hold substantial amounts of U.S. Treasury bonds while continuing to invest heavily in American infrastructure and businesses. These financial ties create a complicated relationship in which both sides possess significant leverage. Nevertheless, regional leaders are also aware that allowing Iran to disrupt the Strait of Hormuz for an extended period would create a direct threat to their own economic security. As a result, they face a complex strategic calculation. Supporting stronger military pressure against Iran could intensify the confrontation and potentially provoke retaliation, while avoiding involvement might enable Iran to gain greater influence over one of the most critical energy routes in the world. Because of these competing risks, many analysts believe that the next few weeks could prove decisive. Gulf countries are closely monitoring the situation at sea and evaluating how the balance of power might shift. If shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz does not return to normal in the near future, pressure on all parties involved in the conflict is expected to rise significantly. International markets, major energy corporations, and governments from the world's largest economies will demand steps to stabilize the situation. Yet the reality is that the crisis may already have advanced to a stage where quick and straightforward solutions are difficult to achieve. Military tensions continue to grow, economic effects are becoming more visible, and the longer the disruption persists, the greater the possibility that the situation around the Strait of Hormuz could evolve into one of the most serious energy crises of the modern era. If that occurs, developments in this small but strategically crucial waterway could influence the economic stability of countries across the entire globe.